I will tell you the answer to my question. It is this. The party seeks power entirely for its own sake. We are not interested in the good of others. We are interested solely in power. Pure power. What pure power means you will understand presently. We are different from the oligarchies of the present in that we know what we are doing. All the others, even those who resembled ourselves, were cowards and hypocrites. The German Nazis and the Russian communists came very close to us in their methods, but they never had the courage to recognize their own motives. They pretended, perhaps they never even believed, that they had seized power unwillingly and for a limited time, and that just around the corner there lay a paradise where human beings would be free and equal. We are not like that. We know that no one ever seizes power with the intention of relinquishing it. Power is not a means, it is an end. One does not establish a dictatorship in order to safeguard a revolution. One makes the revolution in order to establish the dictatorship. The object of persecution is persecution. The object of torture is torture. The object of power is power. Now, you begin to understand me. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are on this planet. Welcome to AAU TZM podcasts. My name is Adam-Antium. You are the audience, and what you just heard was an excerpt from the book 1984 by George Orwell. You also will notice that the intro music has actually changed. It's basically my own initial sort of temp score, as it were, for the track that will appear in my newest short film, Chapter 3 Threshold, but we will get to that in a moment. But yeah, just for the usual announcement, for those of you listening to this on YouTube right now, my podcasts also exist on TalkShoe.com. Down below in the video description you'll be able to find the link, so there you can download and listen to the full podcast for free in MP3 format. So just for those of you who want to do that, you can do that there. There's also the usual plug that I also make. For those of you who want to know exactly what the Zeitgeist Movement actually advocates, then there's an orientation guide that was published this year, called The Zeitgeist Movement Defined. If you go to www.thezeitgeistmovement.com/orientation, you will find the means that you would like to be able to get hold of it. You can buy it for a very low price at I think it's both Amazon.com and Lulu.com. But if you don't want to pay for it, and if you like PDF files, then you can download a PDF of the whole thing completely for free. So you can do that there. You know, obviously, you know, it can be a rather complex train of thought if depending on which angle that you approach it at. But you know, it's specifically written to give as concise a view as possible, but also a detailed as possible view of exactly what the train of thought actually is, what it arrives at, and all that great stuff. But yeah, there's that. Go to www.thezeitgeistmovement.com/orientation. It's called The Zeitgeist Movement Defined. Just another personal announcement. I am still, I do apologise, I'm still working on my last short film that's called Chapter 3 Threshold. It's like the third concluding chapter of a trilogy of short films that I'm making called The Sweep. Right now I'm just having to work my way through composing a sort of like a drum and bass track that will the chorus of which will feature in the film. But you know, because I don't consider myself a musician as such, I'm just about muddling through. But I'm also collaborating with two separate musicians to make it really epic. There's a musician who goes by the name of Racek Oznola. If you search on YouTube for his stuff, you can find that there he does brilliant electronic music, and and I've asked him, can you sort of, I'll finish the music and send it to you, just make it epic, and that's what he's going to be doing. I'm also collaborating with Sheena Bratt, and she's going to be doing some like harmony vocals on that. If you want to find out about her stuff, she also plays in a band called Venus Rising. So if you search for that on Facebook and SoundCloud, I think she's on as well. But that, I'm trying to get that done as quickly as possible. I mean, as I said, I don't consider myself a musician, so it's a matter of getting that done, getting Sheena's vocals, getting my vocals together, putting that together, sending that off to Rasek. He's just going to rip it up, make it really, really cool. And because the thing is, the film itself, it's all done besides this song. So once I've got all that back, I'll just have to just slot that in there, and then I can upload it onto YouTube, and you guys can check out the conclusion to the trilogy that I've been making. But that's it for the other usual announcements. It is my unfortunate task to inform you that Hear No Evil, See No Evil is now no longer our sponsor, since they have had to reallocate nearly all of their funds towards two separate legal battles. And obviously, for legal reasons, I can't speak on the progress of these proceedings. However, I have been authorised to detail what started them. The first was an incident involving a man seeming to rob a Poundland after loading up a trolley and walking out the store with £67 worth of items. That's 67 items, for those of you unfamiliar with how Poundland works. But in his defence, he blamed the headset. So there's that legal battle going on there. The second was an incident of a woman actually going into a seizure after keeping the headset on while walking through a large shopping complex, which will at this time remain unnamed. It appears that the cause of the seizure was sensory overload. So there we have it. Whether they can claw their way back from this and return as our sponsor, I don't know. Their lawyers are currently consulting Satan himself, but they said they'd keep me posted. So, this podcast is brought to you by Tackle, the brand new AI program from the same people who brought you Prism and the Stuxnet virus. What it does is extremely clever. I mean, even though, a word of warning, you should only purchase this if you are the admin of a website or peer-reviewed journal or YouTube channel with multiple contributors and or affiliates. But as I said, what it does is it works to enforce priority functions, editorial controls, and even removal protocols on the content that is uploaded or published with your service. So say, for example, you set, say puppies or scientific literacy as a parameter. If one of your contributors adds something to your project that includes or even refers to puppies or scientific literacy, the algorithms kick in and acts upon it in the manner of your choosing. I mean, that's why it's named as such, to tackle the content to the ground and give it a wedgie, or whatever the digital equivalent of it is these days. So, ladies and gents, please be sure to visit www.getyourtackleout.com/AAUTZM and enter the codename Adam, and you'll get 37% off for a limited period only. Terms and conditions apply. So, also this podcast is brought to you by Russell Brand. Yep, he sends me envelopes of cash in wet plastic bags through the letterbox, which I have to dry on the radiator, but why bite the hand that feeds? He's agreed to co-fund this podcast until he can spare at least 10 minutes to come onto the show and talk with me about science and sustainability. So, cheers, Russell. Ladies and gents, please be sure to message, tweet, text, email, smoke signal, whatever you got to do to thank Russell for sponsoring this show, and be sure to link this show in there as well when you thank him. I mean, the more people thank him, the more likely he will actually come on to talk to us. This podcast is also brought to you by the Green Party candidate Caroline Lucas. You know, it's weird. When I started this podcast over 4 years ago, I'd never thought that I would receive political funding. But it's true. I mean, I receive sporadic funds from her via carrier pigeon. Would you believe it? I say sporadic because some of the payments don't actually make it to me. There's a guy who lives a couple of doors down from me, and I don't think his brain is firing on all cylinders. So, and he loves shooting things. And to make matters worse, he suffers a phobia of pigeons. So as they fly over his garden, he shoots them down, and I can never recover the corpse to get my money. But Caroline is aware of this, and she sends me larger sums, and sometimes the pigeon is wearing Kevlar, a little itty-bitty Kevlar vest. It's pretty cool. But that said, she's agreed to fund this podcast until she can spare at least 10 minutes to come onto the show and talk about science and sustainability when applied to society and our environment. So ladies and gents, be sure to message, tweet, email, smoke signal, whatever you got to do to thank Caroline for sponsoring this show. The more we thank her, the more likely she will be to actually come on to talk to us. The last sponsor, this podcast is also brought to you by Patrick Stewart. Oh yes, it's truly true, people. Ever since someone on YouTube made a video about Captain Picard promoting a resource-based economy, Mr. Stewart has been keenly interested in the work we've been doing, and in fact he's actually said to me quite a few times that while looking over the Venus project, it reminded him of the wonderful vision of Gene Roddenberry himself. So, off his own back, he decided to start beaming me money. I think he's using a prototype of the 3D printer. I think it's the Replicator, I think it's called. It's actually a 3D printer called the Replicator. But I think he's using a prototype because what he sends me, it doesn't always materialise in UK currency. So sometimes I have to go down to the Bureau of Exchange and, whatever. And sometimes it actually materialises halfway inside different walls in my house. But I'm working on, creating an accurate schematic for the building that I live in, so that way when Patrick sends me it can always appear on my bedside cupboard. But that said, he's agreed to co-fund this podcast until he can spare at least 10 minutes to come onto the show and talk about science and sustainability when applied to society and our environment. So, ladies and gents, be sure to message, tweet, email, smoke signal, whatever you got to do to thank Stuart for sponsoring this show, and be sure when you thank him, link this podcast, either the TalkShoe link or part one of the YouTube upload. But the more we thank him, the more likely he will be to actually come on to talk to us. Okay, so that's all the announcements out of the way. As you will know from this show's title, I will be reviewing George Orwell's 1984. Now, there's a few reasons why I've specifically chosen this month to review this film. First of all, the upload date of this podcast is the 5th of November, which is a poignant date in terms of anti-establishment action, with both, Guy Fawkes' attempt to obliterate the Houses of Parliament, an act which I don't condone, but I appreciate for its gestural implications. But also, Anonymous choose this date to stage a march to demand redress of our socio-political issues. So if anyone here is listening with Anonymous, thank you for everything that you do. I really hope that you don't, get violent. Just look at what the problems actually are and think what the real solutions might actually be. But anyway, this year also marks the 30th anniversary of the release of the film that I'm actually going to be reviewing. And it's a bitter irony that still 30 years on from this film, we are still not collectively heeding the warning that the film gave us. And that leads me on to the most important reason for this review. With the help of a few friends, I've compiled a few parallels that this work has with our contemporary society. Parallels which almost qualify Orwell as an accomplished prophet. And I hope, like me, you will feel at the end of this podcast that we are dangerously veering closer and closer to the zeitgeist, as it were, of the fictional world of Oceania. Even Orwell's name itself is synonymous with dystopian ideas, with the creation of the adjective Orwellian. But with any luck, this podcast will present a solid and compelling argument for how far down this dark road we are travelling, and provide the motivation and the knowledge to help us prevent such a world from transcending fiction into fact. Now, there's a phrase that's bounced around the internet for several years now. It's 1984 was not meant to be an instruction manual. When you look around at the world in which we live, it's almost as though this book has been used as such. But so gradually has it been done that it has been slipping under our radars. You know, it's almost like when... do you remember when you were a kid and every now and then you'd go and visit your grandparents and they'd always say, "Oh, you've grown," and you'd look at yourself and go, "No," because the reason being is because your growth has been so gradual that it almost escapes your attention. You know, because it's so gradual. This is the secret to one of the secrets at least, as to how oppressive governmental regimes have been able to slip in their axis of power, as it were, by doing it so gradually and putting a sugar-coated layer on top of it so thick that people just lap it up. They don't realise that they're moving down slower and gradually into tyranny, which is a shame. But when you look around at the world, it's almost as though that this book has been used as such. But you know, it is my hope to bring these things into sharp focus. So to kick off a series of parallels, I'm actually going to read from an article published on the antimedia.org. It was an article written by Justin King. So thank you very much, Justin. This is an awesome article. The article proceeds to quote Orwell, followed by commentary on how said quotes relates to elements of the modern world. I will also link this article in the YouTube video description so you can find this for yourself. But the article goes as follows. George Orwell ranks amongst the most profound social critics of the modern era. Some of his quotations, more than half of a century old, show the depth of understanding an enlightened mind can have about the future. Is quoting Orwell, obviously. In our age, there is no such thing as keeping out of politics. All issues are political issues, and politics itself is a mass of lies, evasions, folly, hatred, and schizophrenia. End quote. Though many in our modern age have the will to bury their head in the sand when it comes to political matters, nobody can only concern themselves with the proverbial pebble in their shoe. If one is successful in avoiding politics, at some point the effects of the political decisions they abstain from participating in will reach their front door. More often than not, by that time the person has already lost whatever whisper of a voice the government has allowed them. Now, just my little commentary on this sort of thing. It's easy to construe that as an argument for the act of voting. Now, I mean, I guess I could just sum it up with one quotation from Mark Twain when he said that if voting made any difference, they wouldn't let us do it. You know, but personally, I think that that sort of that little commentary, it says that, you know, while voting, I personally think that, you know, while voting doesn't make any difference, we cannot be blind and ignorant of the kind of things that politicians are actually doing. We need to be aware of the kind of tricks that they're trying to pull on us, and we need to call them out as and when they spew this bullshit, you know. I mean, one thing that one question that I would love to ask David Cameron is, you know, because every now and then he comes out and says talks about growth, right? Growth, meaning economic growth, being part of the solution to our problems. I mean, one question I would love to ask him is, considering that the Earth is a finite environment, you know, this biosphere is a finite environment of finite resources, right? Well, virtually, but speaking in gesture. What limits are there to economic growth? You know, because the thing is, I mean, we could just be completely ignorant of political issues, so-called political issues, and just not address this whatsoever, or we could actually be cognizant of them and really address them. But anyway, on with the article. Quoting George Orwell, all the war propaganda, all the screaming and lies and hatred comes invariably from people who are not fighting. End quote. It's a good quote, really. Justin says, examining the nightly news in the run-up to almost any military intervention will find scores of talking heads crying for blood to flow in the streets of some city the name of which they just learned to pronounce. Once the bullets start flying, those that clamoured for war will still be safely on set, bringing you up-to-the-minute coverage of the carnage while their stock in Raytheon climbs. I think that one speaks for itself. So, quote, war against a foreign country, only happens when the moneyed classes think they are going to profit from it. End quote. It's pretty self-explanatory, and while it may be hard to swallow, it's certainly true. All it takes is a quick look at who benefited from the recent wars waged by the United States to see Orwell's quip take life. You know, and this is one thing that the Ian R. Crane once says, sometimes says in his presentations when he's presenting all these pieces of information, about like false flag terror attacks and illegal wars that are waged supposedly on our behalf, when in fact they're really just to gain resources. One of the things he says, he just poses the question in Spanish, "Qui bono?" which means who benefits. And I would certainly say that invariably the people who benefit from the war are the people who are waging the war itself, that being the ruling class, as it were. I mean, especially with the I think it was the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, that we send munitions over to destroy the country, and then we get awarded construction contracts to rebuild the country that we have destroyed. But it's not really to rebuild the country, it's rather to build military bases in their country, to militarily occupy them, and to lay pipelines for their oil. But there's that. Quote, "The very concept of objective truth is fading out of the world. Lies will pass into history." End quote. "My most prized books are a collection of history books from around the world. I have an Iraqi book that recounts the glory of Saddam Hussein's victory over the United States in 1991. I have books from 3 different nations claiming that one of their citizens was the first to fly. As some of the most powerful nations in the world agree to let certain facts be forgotten, the trend will only get worse. History is written by the victor, and the victor will never be asked if he told the truth." Now that's quite a powerful concept right there, that even the term history, it doesn't necessarily relate to objective information about past events. It's his story. What is your story? We each have our own history. So really the crux of the matter relies on whether we align his story with that of objective facts about past events. But anyway, moving on. Quote, "In a time of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act." Now this is one concept that I fully wholeheartedly agree with, because as far as I can tell, truth is the objective measure for how we can properly navigate this world. If we care about what is true, then personal perceptions don't mean anywhere near as much. And when we care about what is true, when we align with what is true, we can better navigate this world and better arrive at decisions. But anyway, on with this commentary. Even without the commentary, the reader is probably picturing Edward Snowden or Chelsea Manning. The revolutions of the future will not be fought with bullets and explosives, but with little bits of data travelling around the world, destroying the false narratives with which governments shackle their citizens. Quote, "Journalism is printing what someone else does not want printed. Everything else is public relations." Now, that term public relations, that's something that I will go into later on. But anyway, on with the commentary. Make no mistake about it, if an article does not anger someone, it is nothing more than a public relations piece. Most of what passes for news today is little more than an official-sounding advertisement for a product, service, or belief. Quote, "In real life, it is always the anvil that breaks the hammer." End quote. In every conflict, it is not the side that can inflict the most damage, but the side that can sustain the most damage that ultimately prevails. History is full of situations in which a military won the battles, but lost the war. Quote, "The nationalist not only does not disapprove of atrocities committed by his own side, but he has a remarkable capacity for not even hearing about them." End quote. So, just the commentary. Haditha, Panjwai, Manwand district, Mahmadiyah. These names probably won't ring a bell, but it's almost a certainty that the reader is aware of the brutality that occurred in Benghazi. The main difference is that in the first 4 incidents, those committing the acts of brutality were wearing an American flag on their shoulder. Quote, "Threats to freedom of speech, writing and action, though often trivial in isolation, are cumulative in their effect and, unless..." Quote, "Threats to freedom of speech, writing and action, though often trivial in isolation, are cumulative in their effect and, unless checked, lead to a general disrespect for the rights of the citizen." End quote. Every day there is a new form of censorship or a new method of forcing people into self-censorship, and the people shrug it off because it only relates to a small minority. By the time the people realise their ability to express disapproval has been completely restricted, it may be too late. That brings us to Orwell's most haunting quote. Quote, "If you want a picture of the future, imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever." End quote. Once the people are indoctrinated with nationalistic beliefs and the infrastructure to protect them from some constantly changing and ever-expanding definition of an enemy is in place, there is no ability for the people to regain liberty. By the time all the pieces are in place, not only is opportunity to regain freedom lost, but the will to achieve freedom has also evaporated. The reader will truly love Big Brother. Now, that's the article there. So just to, I just wanted to give that because this guy just puts so eloquently what I have tried to do with this podcast. So with that article, I think we're probably